He's a generational keynote speaker who's been helping organizations bridge the generational gaps over 10 years.
Wherever I'm speaking and whomever I'm speaking to, it doesn't matter if I'm in front of senior leadership one day and interns the next. The topic of effective generational communications and dynamics is something all of us can benefit from, because at one point or another, I think we've all had that moment where we fail to connect with another generation. Now, over 2024, I have to say probably the number one thing clients have been asking me about is about workplace communication. It's been one of the big challenges, and I think since 2020, we've all discovered there are a multitude of new ways that we can communicate, which means there's a multitude of ways that we can miscommunicate.
These opinions can make a real difference in how we see each other, talk to each other, and work with each other, which is generational expert Scott Zimmer's specialty.
We call them clash points, which just means we're approaching the same thing a little bit differently, and it can create a little bit of tension.
Millennials, do me a favor. How do you think other generations describe you, if they had to pick a word? Entitled. Folks, if this were the Family Feud, entitled is always the number one answer on the board. I heard spoiled. What else? Lazy. I always have to remind people they can hear you. They know what you're saying. The perception in the media and by other generations is profoundly negative. I talked about that generational pride boomers share. Millennials, on the other hand, the ones I interview, they tend to distance themselves from the term. Or they qualify it somehow. Yeah, I'm a millennial, but I show up on time and I work hard. Or I'm a millennial, but I really don't believe in labels. Or I'm a millennial, but I'm on the older end, so I just count myself as Gen X. We have a whole generation of young, talented people who feel they have to apologize simply for when they were born. It's the organizations, the companies, the managers, the supervisors who are working past these negative stereotypes to get to the heart of who this generation is and how they want to approach work. Those are the ones who are having the most success with engagement, recruitment, and retaining that young talent. Because
the number one mistake I'm seeing companies make when it comes to connecting with this generation is that they're just treating them like millennials, or they're millennials 2.0, or millennials the sequel. They're not millennials. If 2020 wasn't already shocking enough, here's a stat for you. The oldest millennials this year are turning 40 years old. Let that sink in. They're 40. They're not the new kids coming through the doors. They're already established in their careers. Gen Z grew up during a completely different time, during a completely different set of circumstances, different formative experiences that shaped who they are and what their expectations are when it comes to the workplace. Gen Z, born between 1996 and 2010. Do I have any Zers in here today? Yes. They are outnumbered, but I'm sure we're all going to make them feel right at home. Now, by the way, folks, if you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, that's all well and good, but what if you're born smack dab in the middle? Well, you're what is known as a cusper. Now, cusper, it's not the most technical term, but it applies. Cuspers are those people who kind of are born right in between two different generations. And one thing we've noticed is that in terms of special skills, cuspers are very good at mediating, translating, resolving conflicts, because you're almost generationally bilingual and you can almost understand different perspectives better than most. Generationally bilingual, not a real thing. I wouldn't put that on your LinkedIn under special skills later, but it does prove handy. So little shout out to any of our cuspers in here. If you're a boomer, X, or cusper, you're probably too young to remember all the excitement around the moon landing like other boomers, but you were probably excited when MTV launched in 1981. Little trivia, Xers, first music video MTV ever played? Video killed the radio star. Nice job. 10 points to Gryffindor over there. It's a Harry Potter reference for the millennials. If you're a Gen X millennial cusper, that's me. That's where I fall. We're commonly referred to as Zennials, or maybe the Oregon Trail generation, based on the game we all grew up on. But we were the last group to go through college without any kind of mainstream social media. When I think back on that, like, it's probably for the best that I don't have 4 years of photographic evidence as to what I was up to back then. And then, of course, millennial Gen Zers. These are going to be your new hires. This is a generational cohort that has never known a world that didn't have Google in it and probably couldn't tell you what a card catalog is. Gen Zers, if you're a little nervous about that, here's the thing. You don't need to know what that is. You can just Google it.
Look at on the farm. Look at what the inside of a tractor looked like when you were growing up. Look at what an inside of a tractor looks like today. Not to again sound like Grandpa Scott, but I was lucky growing up if I got to drive the tractor that had the AM/FM radio on the wheel well. Let alone XM radio, heated seats, iPads, self-steering tractors. It is insane the amount of change and evolution that has happened just in your industry, in agriculture and farming, within the confines of the millennials' formative years. You're a generation that experienced a rate of change unlike any other generation before you. A young man comes up to me. He had to be 23 years old. He was very young. And he's like, that was great. My boss is a baby boomer. The guy hates me, so this is gonna come in handy. And I said, well, thank you, I appreciate that. I'm sure your boss doesn't hate you, by the way. I thought he was being a little dramatic about the whole thing. And he looks at me and he thought about that for a second. And he goes, no, I'm pretty sure he hates me. And I couldn't help it. I was being nosy. I said, well, is he here? Point him out. So I make my way over and we're at the bar and I slip it into the conversation. I say, oh, by the way, I met somebody on your team earlier. I met so-and-so. And he looks at me and goes, oh yeah? So-and-so? I hate that kid. And that's such a shame when these moments happen because all these great opportunities for mentorship, for reverse mentorship, they don't happen when we just don't like each other.
I had a client recently. She is a boomer. She told me she went off site and she told her Gen Z intern, our new tablets are going to be delivered today. Text me when they get here. And later that day when she was off-site, she did indeed get that text saying the new tablets arrived and they are fire emoji, fire emoji, fire emoji. Now, most of us in here probably know or might assume that that means they are awesome. They're on fire. My baby boomer client pulled the car over because she assumed what? They were on fire.
Whether you're a baby boomer or a Gen Zer, Minneapolis-based generational expert and keynote speaker Scott Zimmer has some suggestions tailor-made for your generation. For Gen Z, cultivate stronger interpersonal skills. How can they do that?
Their soft skills and interpersonal skills maybe not being up to scratch. In particular, I'll give you one example, the telephone. Now, we have to keep in mind, Gen Z did not grow up with a rotary dial, avocado green phone hanging on the kitchen wall that rang all day. And people, oh, I'll get it. They didn't learn phone etiquette. A lot of homes didn't have landlines at that point in their formative years. So they get to work and they'll sometimes try every mode of communication possible before picking up the phone and making a call just because it's not something they're comfortable with. So I'm challenging Gen Zers this year, stretch that muscle you're not as comfortable with and get a little bit more comfortable because you will have colleagues and clients who still like the interpersonal, the more personal touch of a telephone call over just electronic communication.
So really, everyone should rapid text their Gen Z friends right now and say, call me right now. Call me.
Hey, if you have to start to stretch that muscle, you have to find ways to do it. So force yourself instead of sending that text, make the call.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
P.S. In the Mallory household, we had a beige rotary phone, and that cord could go anywhere. It was very stretched out. Scott Zimmer tours the world helping people and companies bridge generational gaps, and you can learn more about Zimmer and how to bring a presentation to your workplace by visiting his website, Scott Talks. That's TALKS.com, scotttalks.com. Alex, did you learn anything?
I certainly
your
did, but
generation?
no, I'm thinking about the rotary phone too,
Yeah.
because we had one in our kitchen, but ours was yellow.
Oh,
and it
yeah,
had
yeah.
a really, really long cord, which is akin to today's, I don't know, AirPods or
Yeah.
earbuds, because that was, you could go into a closet and have a quiet
Yeah.
conversation.
And then if your parents wanted you to stop, you could feel the cord being tugged
My
on. It's
turn.
like, I have to wrap this up.
My turn. Yes.
Those were the days, kids.
Yes.